Start the recording now. Will it work for you, Jonathan?
It won't let. Oh no, it says it started recording.
Oh, recording has started. There you go.
It was just delayed, so it's
so it's just very slow computer. Apologies, honestly. You'd think it'd be Friday afternoon. It's not. It's only Wednesday. Oh well, never mind. Right, welcome everybody. Welcome. So I'm Steve. For the English schools that have joined that I've not met before, you'll see Richard's friendly face in the middle of the screen there. You'll recognise him, of course. I'm Steve. I've been working with the Scottish schools on their outdoor workshops, and Richard obviously has been working with the English schools. So welcome to everybody who's joined. We're just going to do a quick round robin, if that's all right, with all these little friendly faces on the screen, and then we've just got a couple of slides to show you, and obviously there's lots of opportunity just to ask a few questions. So we know you guys have had a busy day, and there's lots already happening in school, so we're not going to keep you for too long. We just want to make sure that you leave feeling relatively comfortable with what's happened so far and what's going to happen next. Oh, a new person. Here we go. They're all filing in now. Okay, so I'm Steve. Basically, I work for Learning Through Landscapes in Scotland in the Stirling office, and I'm supporting the schools in Scotland, the 6 schools. So yes, Jonathan, would you like to introduce who you are, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Hancock. I'm a research assistant at University of Edinburgh, working on this project. Laura?
Good afternoon, and I'm Laura Colucci-Gray. I think I've met some of you, and I work at the University of Edinburgh in Murray House, the School of Education and Sport. And I'll pass on to Advait.
Hi, I'm Advait Siddharthan. I'm the computer scientist in this group, and I'm leading the bit to develop this haptic device and put it into things. And it's been great fun visiting the English schools last month. And I'll let Jonathan talk through what we can perhaps do with this device going forwards a little later.
Poppy?
Hello everyone, I'm Poppy Lakeman-Fraser from Imperial College London and Natural England. I'm an ecologist, I have a background, also citizen science manager, and I've been helping feeding into the resources and advice on the project. I'll hand over to Julie.
Hi there, I'm Julie Newman. I'm a teacher on the south coast of England. Been in the job for over 30 years, so primary teacher, so taught from 4 up to 11, and I'm just involved with the teaching resources and the technology side of things, just as someone on the ground, really. Have we done everybody?
Thanks, you guys. And then Richard, do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi. I'm Richard. I work for LTL. I've been doing the outdoor workshops in the English schools.
Okay, so we've only got a few slides. We're not going to bore you to death with PowerPoint. We've just got a few slides to help support the discussion we're going to have. Jonathan has access to all that, all the great stuff, and then we're going to have a bit of a question and answer session at the end. So, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen. Welcome to those people who just joined. Thank you for coming along. Much appreciated. Okay, can everybody see that? So we're pretty good. Front. So this is about the Sense projects. Obviously, you guys all know about that, but we've got a little kind of introduction about the projects as well that Jonathan's going to share in a minute. And the next slide, Jonathan, if you don't mind, is a bit of an overview of what we're going to just chat about over the next sort of 45 minutes or so. So a quick overview of the project and what we've been up to so far, and then a bit of sharing from schools about what they've been up to too. So Jonathan's very kindly put together this Padlet, which hopefully you've all got access to, and if not, we can definitely send the link again after this, with the idea being that basically we can sort of add photographs and share on there as well in terms of things we've been doing. I've added a few bits and pieces that I picked up from schools so far, and so has Jonathan. So if you guys have got extra stuff to add, that would be ace. It's just good to share across the board and find out what everybody's up to. That's what the Padlet is for. We're going to chat a little bit about the texture board and discuss that, because obviously I know that some people have got some concerns about getting that sorted, so we can have a chat about what that's going to look like. And then Laura's going to finish off with a little bit about kind of next steps and what's going to happen after that. And then we've got a little bit of time for questions, obviously the most important part. So please feel free to question us to death at the end. That'll be great. We definitely want to answer your questions. That's the whole point of this afternoon. Okay.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks everyone for joining. It's great to get everyone together from the project today. I'm sorry if anyone can hear any background noise. My neighbors have picked the perfect time to dig up their garden and saw things in half and stuff like that. So apologies if you can hear anything in the background there. But I'm just going to give a quick recap of what the project aims are, what we're trying to do with this project. So when we met the first time, I think we talked about this context of children spending less time in the outdoors, being less connected to nature. And we know that's happening in general, but in schools as well, we know that the amount of time that children spend in the outdoors is decreasing. So the goal of this project really is to explore the school grounds, sensory explorations of the school grounds, and augment that with haptic touch technology, and see whether that can help to reconnect or reestablish those connections to the outdoors and to nature. And we're focusing in particular on the sense of touch and investigating whether that can help to develop a sense of place and belonging in the school environment. And I think that's something that we've seen the beginnings of through some of the outdoor workshops and the way the children have explored their school grounds, how they've taken ownership of some of the things that they found there. So we're going to talk a bit about that as well. And also the other aspect of this is combining art-based activities. So in the outdoor workshops and in the haptic workshops as a way of kind of focusing in on some more of the details, the tactile nature of these objects, as a way of kind of prompting exploration and inquiry and thinking about different questions that the children might have about why certain things grow in their school grounds, why other things don't, the changes that happen across the seasons, why certain kinds of insects are in their school grounds. So things like that, and kind of working towards them perhaps having ideas and suggestions about changes or developments that they want to make in the school grounds as well. So that's a kind of a key goal through the project. But there's a progression towards that, and that's what we're going to go over today. So there's 10 schools involved in the project across Scotland and England. And I'm going to recap a little bit about what we've done so far, because some of the Scottish schools and the English schools have slightly different starting points, and also just the nature of the project, some schools are at different stages. So we want to talk a little bit about that, and we've got a roadmap towards the end where it will kind of become clear how these activities kind of align, and your schools will kind of come together on those activities going forwards. So in the Scottish schools, the 6 Scottish schools, we did some baseline research where we worked with groups of pupils, normally around 2, in a space outside of the classroom. And they were exploring different objects from nature, so bark and shells, pine cones, bird feathers, flowers, things like that. And the idea behind this was to kind of look at what the impact of touch is on learning and what value children place in tactile experiences. And it also was a great way of us getting to know the children, of them getting to know us as the researchers, and also looking at how they kind of explore things together about touch and how they like to learn. I should point out, and we've had discussions about this, that calling it baseline was perhaps a bit misleading, because the plan isn't to come back in and do these same activities again. This is kind of like the first step, the first activity, and then the progression through those of the outdoor workshops and the haptic workshops. That's the way we're going to go with that. So hope that provides a bit of clarity, and sorry for any confusion there. We confused ourselves even a little bit calling it the baseline, so we'll need to come up with a different name for that maybe. So a few more examples from that research. I think what was really interesting was to look at the different ways that children talked about, communicated about touch. So the things that they said, but also the ways that they use touch and manipulation. And by that, I mean turning the objects around, tapping the objects, bouncing them on the table, picking them up and dropping them, matching objects together, all these different ways they use to kind of make meaning and gain understanding through touch and manipulation. And another interesting thing was around gestures that they used. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here, the boy was kind of rubbing his fingers together to talk about a touch experience that he had. In this case, I think it was when a bumblebee had flown over his hand and he was rubbing his fingers together to kind of remind himself and also help him communicate about that. We saw lots of examples of that, which was really interesting. So it was how they talked about touch, how they used touch, how they used gestures, how they used their gaze as well. You can see the top left-hand corner. It was how they used these in isolation and also together and work together. You can see in the top right-hand corner here an example of them talking together and communicating about touch, which was also really interesting. And we also were looking at how they talked about memories. So the shell, for example, they often talked about trips to the beach, but another one would be the bark reminding them of a tree house they had when they were younger. And also things around emotions and how they felt. So they talked about feeling calm or feeling relaxed when touching certain of the objects, like the bird feather in particular. They commented about that. And also the different descriptions and comparisons, analogies that they made, some really creative ones, especially when they were talking about more abstract touch. So touching a cloud would feel like getting sprayed with a water gun. That was one example. Or touching lava would feel like porridge. So they would come up with these really nice creative examples to talk about less direct touch experiences. And as well, there were lots of questions. You could see the beginning of that kind of inquiry, that sort of scientific inquiry through that as well. So why is this leaf smooth and this other leaf crunchy? Why does this leaf have hairs on it? So you could see those coming through, which was really interesting in terms of how they use touch for learning. And you can see in these examples that they're using touch, but there was variation across that. So there were some other children who were a bit more reluctant to use touch to explore. But it was interesting that in those cases, often they would use gestures a bit more often. So perhaps there's kind of a link there that we can explore. So that was the first sort of step with the Scottish schools. And then in England, the first stage was the haptic technology workshops, and I was able to visit for a couple of those. And for those of you who haven't seen or haven't had a chance to experience the haptic device yet, you can see here it's on a laptop. It can also be on a tablet. And there's the stylus here, which the children use to touch the screen, and then they feel the texture through that. And it's also combined with sound. So, for example, there's one image of a bee, and they can hear the buzzing at the same time as feeling the texture of that. So there were lots of interesting things that came out of this as well, the ways that they were able to describe and sometimes even identify the texture, sometimes without the visual. So sometimes the picture wasn't there, but they were still able to identify what it was that they were touching. The bee, for example, perhaps because they heard the buzzing and they could recognize that was a bee. But lots of really creative ways they used to talk about their experience with the haptic device. So they said, it feels like my granddad's beard, or it feels like dragging a pencil on the moon is a really nice one. And using touch and sound adjectives as well, like squidgy and crackly and words like that to describe them. And again, we were looking at different memories they talked about, different emotions, different types of questions that were prompted through this. One group I was working with, they were touching the different tree barks, and then they were comparing that to the trees in their own school grounds. That was a really nice example, and asking questions about that. And you can see again the touch gesture coming into it. The boy here is using a very similar gesture to the example on the slide I shared before. And here he was talking about what it felt like to use the haptic device, and he's using the same gesture there. So Again, there was a bit of variation. So some children said, oh, all of these things feel the same, whereas others perceived differences between the textures and even within the textures. So the snake skin, for example, they could say they felt that there was different textures across the scales there. And then we also, in a couple of schools, incorporated some artistic activities. So they would do a drawing of a snake, a fish, a goat, and a tree. Then they would use the haptic device, and then they went back and did the drawings again. And that was interesting to look at some of the differences there, and the fact that in some cases they were actually looking to represent texture, or there was greater attention to tactile detail. The scale, sometimes the drawings were much bigger, and you can see a couple of examples of that here. So they've added scales to the snake and the fish, and then with the tree here, they've tried to use the pencil, the colored pencil, to represent a different type of texture, and the haptic device had different types of tree bark. So you can see that maybe that's influenced things there. I'm just going to share a new tool that the Open University and Advaith have been developing, which is a way of actually using a coloring tool combined with the haptic technology. So I'm just trying to share that now. So this is something that the Open University are developing at the moment. So the children will be able to use the haptic crayon here and actually pick these different textures. I can hear something there. I don't know if anyone else can, perhaps not, but there will be a sound and they'll be able to feel it at the same time. These different textures. So lots of different examples there that they might use. And Advaith's daughter has actually been testing this out. She's 7 years old, so I'll share a couple examples of that. So here, hopefully you can see that. You'll see she's drawn a crocodile and a tree there, which is nice. And I like this one as well, as a snake, and I think we were discussing earlier whether it's a gerbil or a mouse, but I think it's going to get eaten by the looks of it because the snake is saying it's a snack.
So this is her first attempt at it, Jonathan.
Okay.
So this is the very first time she encountered this, and she made the mouse first, and then she made this snake, and then she wanted to write snake, but I told her she'd written snack, and then she put it in a bubble and made the mouse go ah.
Okay.
That's the story here.
Okay, all right. So it wasn't intended to say snack in the first place then?
No.
Okay, all right. Well, I'd still feel like it might get eaten at some point, perhaps, but we'll have to ask her about that. But this is just an example of how this might be used. And yeah, the fact that they can feel the texture as they're drawing, but also feel it afterwards. I think if they use this button here, they can then feel the texture that they've drawn. So we think this has quite exciting possibilities. And Advaith want to mention as well that we will be able to provide each of the schools with a tablet and a stylus that they can keep, so that you can use with your class, with your children at any time, not just when we're there visiting. So that's what we've done in terms of the baseline in the Scottish schools and in the English schools with the haptic workshops. So I'm just going to pass on to Steve now to talk a bit about the outdoor workshops. Steve, are you there?
It does help if I take it off mute, doesn't it? That's quite useful.
Oh, okay.
So we've got a wide variety of schools. There are obviously 6 in Scotland and 4 in England, and there are still 2 in Scotland that haven't started yet. They are starting this week and next week. So we're all at very different stages, so don't worry. about the stage you're at. It's just the way the project has worked out. So we've got quite a variety of schools, which is really interesting. So we've got some really small rural schools, and we've got some big urban schools. We've got schools that have practically 90% tarmac basically, and hardly any green space at all. And then we've got schools that are, you know, have enormous grounds. So yeah, huge variety basically. But the whole point in any school, in any of the schools that we're working with, is to basically help the children to sort of slow down a little bit, and to explore and to investigate and to spend a bit of time just using their senses to help support their inquiry-based learning. So to basically sort of discuss and then to analyze what the particular reasons for something, and then to interpret what those reasons are. So classic example. In one of the schools that has very little green space, we found some grass that we felt like, you know, one of the children described it as a sort of hair-like. It was, you know, because it's individual strands of grass, very hair-like. And then we found grass in another part of the grounds that was much more mushy and squishy and more moss basically than grass. And we quickly realised through sort of discussion that was because that area of the grounds we found the mossy bit in was more kind of damp and dark and not so attractive to spend time in, and they hadn't really visited that space before. And there was a reason why the grass was a bit more mushy and wet rather than the grass that was further on the other side where it was a bit more sunny. So little things like that helps us sort of explore and investigate, but also give them the chance to feel different things, even though it's the same species of plant essentially. So yeah, there's another slide after this, Jonathan, I think. So we've been using, obviously for those of you who've done the workshops already, we've been using different ways to interpret materials through art. So we've used clay, and we've used materials, and we've used chalk, and we've used sticky back plastic, all sorts of stuff, tin foil, that kind of thing. You don't have to carry on doing that if you don't want to. That's not a problem. It's just basically that idea of helping to support the children to investigate texture and pattern, and that's how I interpret it as part of the initial workshops that we ran with you guys, and that's Richard ran in England. And really, like I say, the idea is very much to help support the children to explore, but also to spend a bit of time outside class as well. It's not just a class-based activity, and I hope you guys have got the gist of that and feel comfortable with that. But obviously it's really nice for the children to spend a bit of time outside during break and lunchtime doing their own explorations and spending time feeling and discussing and exploring and sharing what they find, either with each other or maybe bringing stuff back into class and sharing with you, that kind of idea. So it's really, like we say, just helping to support the children to sort of slow down and take notice, I guess. And a lot of you will have had workshops that were kind of in the depths of winter. So we started in kind of November, December time, which was a bit, obviously, you know, things were dead, so to speak. But actually, it was amazing how many things we found and what variety we found in terms of opportunity outside, even when it looked like there was nothing available. But obviously now in the spring, you know, the world is our oyster. There's lots of stuff going on, lots of things changing on a daily basis, which is an absolute joy. So yeah. I think there's one more picture slide, Jonathan, before you move on to the Padlet. So here's a couple of quick examples, super quickly, and that's what the Padlet is for, basically, which is the next slide after this. But it's just to help upload some photos and some ideas so that we can share with each other, and you can share with the children, and you can add your own. So a variety of things here. The clay in the middle there at the bottom, the leaf there. The little girl at Allen's Prime, which is one of my schools in Stirling that has mostly tarmac and hasn't been able to come today, unfortunately. This little girl pressed this leaf and spent an awful long time pressing it to the point where she had it just perfect. And then she was so proud of it that she took it home. We lost that. But yes, that idea that basically she literally replicated, she was amazed that she'd literally replicated the leaf in clay, and you could almost feel the outline of the leaf in the same way on the clay that you could when you actually touch the leaf itself. And then on the left-hand side at the bottom there, that's just an interpretive drawing of the moss, the lichen-covered stick rather, and the stick that had no lichen growing on it at all. And again, they were found in different parts of the grounds, and we discussed the reasons behind that and what lichen represents on sticks, why it's there, and all that sort of stuff. So again, it just promoted a bit of discussion through, they found something, they thought it was interesting, and that led on to further discussion. And that's kind of what we're hoping you'll get out of it as well, in terms of the class and the children being outside. So it's the Padlet next, Jonathan, if that's all right.
Yep, I'll just bring that up.
So hopefully you guys have got access to this. You should have. The link's been sent through and I can send it again, no probs. Jonathan and I have just added a few bits and pieces on there already, just in terms of photographs and things that we found from different schools. And again, it's just a sort of repository really to add bits and pieces on there, just so you've got some ideas to to work on and to share with the children, but also to potentially copy and develop yourselves. So it's split into different subject headings. You can see here, I am an absolute technophobe. I completely appreciate that some of you will be super whizzy on the computer. I am not. Jonathan will to testify that I sent him a very excited email when I managed to upload a photograph onto this without asking any questions. So it is very straightforward. There's definitely ways to do it that aren't difficult at all. So I've just added a few bits and pieces on here through the photos. Jonathan's scrolling down there. Some of these latest ones are from Canvas Baron, and Ali Monroe is here today. Hi, Ali. And has been doing all sorts of stuff, including including this one with rabbit poo, which I think is brilliant. I love that. I love the fact they were touching literally everything, not just the stuff that appears to some people. They got down and dirty and literally found all sorts of stuff. And again, you wouldn't notice that sort of stuff if you didn't slow down and spend a bit of time exploring. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity. There's a picture further on of the texture board that Canvas Baron are working on and have created on their walls. You can look at this at your leisure time, obviously. That's one example, and then the next one a bit further down. That's one example. Ali, do you want to explain? Was that a bit more around kind of different textures? Obviously there. Hi. Oh no, we can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can anybody hear? No. Okay. No, never mind. Okay. Jonathan, can you just ping the texture board picture up? Is that all right? So here we go. So this is Canvas Baron working on their texture board at the moment in class. So drawing a massive sort of plan of the grounds, basically, and then looking at the different habitats and the different variety that they found out and about in the springtime. And this is on the wall of the classroom, as well as that other green sheet that I showed you before that has a bit more detail in terms of sort of honing down into some of the individual textures that they found. So Jonathan, can you just very quickly, sorry, I know we have to move on, but can you just show that picture of the stick and the feather, just because I love it so much? That one. So isn't this so cool? How cool is this? So this is one of the children in Alice Cash's primary 5. Using a descriptive feather to help describe what the stick felt like. So the inside was fluffy and the outside was hard. So the stick has been stuck to the feather rather has been stuck to the stick to help interpret that, which I just thought was very clever. That was very clever. Jonathan, do you want to add anything to the Padlet stuff?
Yeah, I think just to say that, there's the photos are one example. There's some videos there that I took at some of the outdoor workshops. If that's something you want to upload, there's also different quotes from the children, talking about nature's perfume. This was at St. Francis, I think. They were exploring the tree and the tree sap and thinking about how that could be used to make a perfume, which I thought was a really nice example. So just little things like that are really interesting to us. And then reflections, those can be really short. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be a big long comment, just any kind of reflections you have. And if you have any questions about the project as well, this might be a way, if you want to ask here, it might be useful for other people working on the project as well, that you might want to see that. And we have some resources there that Poppy and Julie are going to talk about in a minute. But you can even upload things like audio on this if you're feeling super confident about it. But yeah, it's just I think it's a nice way of us capturing what's happening across the different schools. And it'd be lovely to see some examples of some of the things you're doing with the children. That would be great.
If you're not competent, or you don't feel comfortable, or you don't have the time, or whatever, feel free to send it through to me. I don't mind. Now I know how to do it. I don't mind uploading. If you have things you would like to share and there's stuff coming out that you think is genuinely really interesting and you would like other children in other schools to see, then do feel free to send it and we can upload it for you. No probs. It's just a good opportunity to keep it all in one place, basically. Okay, so we're just going to hand over to Poppy and to Julie now, if that's all right, about the what next bit. So a bit more about the texture board and answering some of your questions around that, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so it's absolutely fantastic to see some of those examples of texture boards already in development and already kind of up on walls. And it's been fascinating to me to see this after kind of all the development work we've been doing on the worksheet here. So yeah, so as you were seeing, so as I understand, some of you have had the outdoor exploration sessions, some of the tech, and Julian and I would like to talk to you more about a potential approach we could help deepen your appreciation and exploration of nature through touch and through the self-guided exploration at a time and a place which suits you and your students. So yeah, so this resource on Padlet here, and you may have already seen the worksheet, and it suggests some steps for exploration through the seasons, kind of at different times of day, different opportunities within the school day. And you may have even tried it already, which is brilliant. So, but just really wanted to kind of create this session for those that might not have seen it and those that maybe have but want to ask questions around it. So these are kind of a series of steps which are really suggestion, and it's really about how you could take this as inspiration and vary it depending on the age and the kind of context in which you're working. So the first page on this is really a bit of an overview about exploring nature through touch and how that can bring learning to life. And a bit about what sensorial inquiry is about, kind of asking the type of questions, what does it feel like? A lot of the content which has been discussed already today. But also kind of, is this similar to things that you've experienced before? Is it a different experience perhaps from how someone else might be experiencing it? And then the second page really touches on a number of activities around this creation of the texture board. So kind of starting kind of at this the premise of observing your space first and foremost, walking around. Could you make a sketch of the area? Some people have already done. Could the students choose a space and sit, and then use all of the senses, not just touch, to really get an understanding of what you can hear, smell, maybe even taste. Then building on that, kind of exploring and collecting different items as you move around the space, making a collection and maybe investigating through art. It's really brilliant to see some of the bark rubbings, the sketches that have already been developed. And the next one is around the storing and labelling. So really kind of emulating this curation, perhaps in museum spaces where you're kind of creating a luggage tag attached to it, which has kind of where you found it and some of the words that students might use to describe it. And then one around this texture record. So this kind of might have been called different names, texture board, texture record, but really a kind of presentation, a multi-sensory impression of the grounds. So it really kind of encapsulates the different ways in which the grounds have been described and the different senses that have been touched on. And this could be a whole diversity of arrays, which we'll go on to some examples shortly. And then sharing, could the students create a story or poem around this whole experience, documenting the process through poetry or a video, or however creative you and your students would like to get. Also possibly the opportunity to kind of write a blog for the Sense website. I think that's kind of under development at the current time. So if we can move on to why we're doing all of this, please, next slide. So as Jonathan touched on before, it's really kind of getting into this connection with nature. So beyond just the visual, it's kind of normally used to kind of explore outdoor spaces. Did this lead to a better understanding of that particular object and moving around that space? They kind of ground in students in the landscape and get a different appreciation for what that space means to them. You conduct it in different weathers at different times of the year. For example, do stones feel different when it's just been raining compared to when the sun's out? Perhaps the more crispy type textures in the autumn, and different kind of language used to describe the objects at different times of the year. Could this really kind of deepen and aid understanding of the environment? So kind of really immersing in the outdoor space through the, understanding the textures, you start to notice more. So, for example, was observing a student the other day where they were looking really closely at a furry leaf, and on that, it wasn't until they were looking closely that they noticed a snail on there. And kind of deepening that, if you understand the environment, do you care for it more? And then this kind of inquiry-based learnings we mentioned before, through these explorations, does this yield kind of certain questions? We mentioned kind of difference between a hairy leaf and a smooth leaf, maybe like some barks, smooth or ridged, and why is that? And then it leads to questions potentially of the speed of growth of the barks, and then getting into some of the biological characteristics. Okay, and so how to do this then? Next slide, please. So when I introduced myself, I realised I didn't mention that I've also been working directly in a nursery setting with preschoolers. It's actually at my daughter's preschool, and it's really been great to explore these approaches and activities with younger audiences. And I know Caroline's on the line, so thanks for having me along to the session the other day, Caroline. And so I just wanted to give an example of the texture board that Westrise developed as a result of the session. And it was really fantastic to see Canvas Baron texture board and how that was laid out in across the map of the school site, and very kind of particular textures added to the different areas of the school grounds. And this is quite a similar approach that we took at Westrise. So we started off indoors, we had an array of objects, starting to explore the differences between pine cones and say holly leaves, and the feelings and the words attached to those. And then went outdoors and did some of the activities that are in those worksheets. So kind of sat and immersed ourselves in the environment. And then students really enjoyed running around, picking up different objects and describing them in different ways. And then at the end, we kind of were asking the questions, what would you like to see differently in this landscape and in your outdoor, it's called nature garden and the preschool garden. So after the session, Caroline and students created this fantastic text board, as you can see on the top right there, really adding a lot of the found objects, but also the words that we use to describe, or the feelings that were yielded as a result of taking part. And then went back in for a kind of follow-up session for sensory planting. And we've got this texture board out again, and it was really interesting to see the students' eyes light up and we're like, oh, what did I say here? And it was really great to revisit that, and then it really kind of take that learning and then think about, right, how are we going to change those school grounds? And we did a kind of sensory planting session whereby we were involved, all the students were involved in digging over the ground, feeling the soil, and kind of found a number of things along the way, like frogs, and then each having a plant which they were exploring before and then after, and that kind of yielding that how to care for that going forward, and exploring some of those questions of why do some of those plants smell the way they smell, to kind of attract pollinators or perhaps deter predators. And we did a wildflower seed area as well, and then there's potential there to add some of those experiences to the map after the session as well. So just really sharing a few reflections of kind of approaches that we've taken, but I'll be really keen to read through the Padlet and see what else has been going on amongst the schools. So that's experience from younger audiences, and I know Julie is kind of going to talk about her kind of tips for how to integrate these into kind of the school environment. So over to Julie.
Okay. Yes, it's just a bit of reassurance really for anyone that needs it. I mean, it's entirely up to you. You know your school best, you know your pupils best, and there's no right or wrong way to produce a texture board. There's already been some really creative examples. And I do know it's very hectic, and I do know life is extremely busy in schools. So if you can find ways of doing 2-in-1, by all means do it. So a lot of the things that you're doing when you're out and exploring your grounds will obviously, cover your science objectives. When you're doing life cycles, when you're doing habitat work, you can integrate aspects of this project into those, all the sorting and the classification. In terms of sharing things with one another, certainly I found that with the computing curriculum, when we are creating video and audio, that there are ways and means that you can incorporate project work into that. If your students are happy to do voice memos or to go out into the grounds and use an app in order to capture those textures and produce a collage that way, you can cover several objectives at once. Again, with the art curriculum, all that drawing going through into collage, some beautiful examples already of rubbings, using those to actually produce drawings. Working on vocabulary, we certainly found that since the pandemic is something that our pupils have struggled with. So all that rich environment of being out there handling objects, maybe possibly using it for poetry or descriptive writing in story writing. And we don't want you to feel pressured to have to run a full session every time you go out. So sometimes some short and snappy ways, if you tag on, sometimes go out 5-10 minutes early before break time, almost do like a Darwinian thinking walk where children are just looking around and seeing what's changed in their environment, really taking time, as people were saying, to notice nature. Perhaps if you are lucky enough to have a teaching assistant, to have a small group out doing literally a 5-minute scavenger hunt, coming back with those objects and seeing whether their peers are able to identify that collection, for example, whether it was a soft or a scratchy collection that they've made. And if possible, to try and incorporate things into whole school events. I don't know if any of you are taking part in outdoor classroom day that's coming up on the 18th of May. There's another one on the 2nd of November. It might be that you could then do some of the project work then, maybe share with your colleagues. The more people that know about what you're doing, it's nice to have a sense of community and build that up, because you can bounce ideas off of one another. I mean, I cover a lot of people's release time, and if I can, then I will sort of link things in with projects. If thinking about going on to next year, we're hoping that the project will carry on with the class. So if there are possibilities of sharing what you've done with what will be their new teacher, that would be brilliant. Things that you can share at home, sometimes having really simple tasks over a holiday or over a summer, just asking pupils to bring back a favourite object that they like the texture of, that they found in nature. We don't want it to have to be complicated for you. And as I say, just thinking about how we can share what you're doing with one another. But from what I've seen, there are some really lovely original ideas. And I think the beauty of primary is that we're able to do an activity and that we can make it cross-curricular. But I know time is getting short, so I will leave it there.
Okay, so we're coming to the end, and then we can open up for a bit of sharing and questions. So we've kind of tried to tell a story here today, to kind of sort of touch base indeed, and put ourselves in the same space with the project. So we kind of wanted to share with you how children responded to learning through touch and through tactile explorations, and we got quite a lot of evidence that both during the kind of outdoor workshops and also using the technology, touch seems to be a really important vehicle for learning that has triggered some really significant experiences for children. We would like to use more of that particular way of learning, enhance it in order to develop these attachments that we see that develop very well through touch, attachment to place, attachment to objects, understanding things because we touch them, we feel them. And by so doing, direct our attention and our concern towards the environment we live in. And first and foremost is the environment of the school, because it's a place that the children feel nurtured, where they feel safe, where they spend a lot of time with friends and the teachers. So this is really a way to get to know that place using touch, map it, run a sensory inquiry, understand what it is made of, what it is populated by, the kind of relationships that children can establish with things in that environment can be a special step, a special place, a tree, and some insects like watching. So all that gets mapped out in this sort of idea of making up this sensory board. Either that they go through that process of inquiry using the technology or the outdoors, they do things that are integrated. And in fact, this is what has happened this year. And I'll give you here a bit of a breakdown or a summary of the project roadmap. With all schools in Scotland had what Jonathan called the baseline activity, which is not a baseline, but more a familiarization activity to understand how touch for children actually works. Then the Scottish schools are through the outdoor workshops, and now we come to a webinar. For the English schools, it was the other way around. They started with a haptic workshop. They all did the outdoor workshop in the same way, and now we'll come to a webinar. We now have a phase that we call teacher-led activities, and we hope that some of the materials that we have put together are helpful to you, the ones of the sensory explorations, the sensory inquiry that Poppy kind of introduced. And those resources are there to kind of guide you and your children in creating this map of the school grounds, what we call a texture board. What is it? It is a way of curating the observations and the findings that the children have made in their grounds. And that will become a display that will give schools and the children involved a picture, effectively, a picture of their place through textures. And the fact that it is through texture, it means that it contains the feelings, the emotions, and the discoveries that the children have made. But also it is a texture that could change because it's done over a period of time. So it might be that you create more than one texture, or that in the same texture board, you might find there are objects belonging to different seasons, and they might look different and they might feel different. So this whole idea is basically a way of drawing attention to the place and stimulate the sense of touch. Now, whole schools will reach the summer break. What we're planning to do in the next year is actually to effectively integrate the haptic and the outdoor workshop. So you will see that hopefully we can gain access to the same class that has been involved this year in the initial phase. But we'll start with an haptic technology workshop, followed by an outdoor workshop. And the idea there is that as the children have developed the texture board, that there will be a sense there of areas of the grounds that perhaps could be changed. I wouldn't want to use the word improved, but because it's not that we have an idea in mind or what makes something good, but it's something that could be discussed with the children, and on the basis of having studied or having kind of discovered the grounds, understanding, for example, that an area might do with a little bit more flowers. Shall we put some pots in there? Or an area is hard to sit on. It's not as comfortable as the patch of grass over there. What can we do? It's an area where there is a lot of biodiversity. Can we enhance it a little bit more, maybe by making some labels and describing what's living there? So the idea is to get the children to use the knowledge that they have gained through their tactile explorations to actually make those grounds more biodiversity friendly, more welcoming for them to live, to stay on, to play with, to learn, and in a sense enhance also the possibilities for other creatures to live in that place. We will have a webinar again to touch base and share experiences, and a way of capturing and sharing the changes. As Poppy mentioned, we would like to encourage teachers and pupils to put materials on the Padlet so that people can kind of see what's going on in other schools in the different settings in which the project is taking place, but also on the blog on our website, so that it becomes effectively a way for all the schools to kind of put out, you know, what they discovered over the course of the project and share it with others. And then this project finished, I think that was about September 2024. Okay, I close here. I hope I haven't confused any further on any more. And if we could maybe get some feedback from the people in attending the webinar, or any questions.
I'm having a bit of trouble with my mic. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorted. Yes. Okay. So just in the last 5 minutes or so, it'd be really cool if you guys have Ruth from Shelbourne has put in the chat about resending the Padlet link, which is absolutely fine. And I'm going to carry on populating it with bits and pieces. And if you guys get the chance to do that, that will be ace. But I can definitely send a link to that. That's no problem at all. There's some really great stuff on there in terms of categorizing and all that kind of stuff. So it's not all just about the texture board. It's about kind of what happened with some of the materials as well. So it's up to you guys just to have a quick look through if you want to. But yeah, obviously contact me as well if you want some ideas that I can just send to you directly. But yeah, it should be on the Padlet. That should be helpful, hopefully. So anybody want to share anything exciting that they've done, or anything cool, or something that a child has said to you and you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. We'd have to do more of that. Or have any questions about some of the stuff that's been discussed just now, please do now is your chance. Now is your chance, either in chat or if you fancy sharing your voice. If not, it's absolutely fine. In some senses, that means we've done our job. In some senses. Is everybody okay with that whole idea about, so that's worth just reiterating again, that idea that if this runs into, well, obviously it will hopefully run into next year, with the idea being that basically we retain the class, because obviously we appreciate that you guys aren't going to necessarily know what classes you're going to have next year until later in term, and obviously that your class that moves on next year won't know who they're going to be with. So that idea again of being able to sort of share what you're doing this term with the rest of the school, so that the new teacher knows a little bit more about it. Is that okay? Does anybody envisage that being any sort of problem? Is that all right? Grand, okay. And the haptic stuff, the Scottish schools, the haptic stuff is coming, I promise you. I promise you. It's on its way. Anybody else want to say anything? Laura, Julie, Abeth, Richard, anybody? Jonathan wants to say anything else? We've definitely coming to the end if nobody's got any more questions. Obviously, Richard's around and I'm around, and we are going to hopefully revisit again next year. That is the plan. Obviously, we're around to answer questions and feedback and that kind of stuff. It's not a problem if you just get in touch whenever you feel you need to, or if something comes up and you just want to ask a quick question, just fire an email out. No problem at all.
No, just to say that if you were, particularly interested this year, it's always hard handing over to someone else, but we certainly said that there would be capacity for people to carry on, independently in your own classroom practice and still be involved, and hopefully, as I say, support one another. So don't sort of feel that you have to be cut out.
To be cut out.
Yes, well,
Correct.
you spent the whole time working on a project. It's nice to be able to.
I totally agree.
As well, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I
think just
okay.
As well, it's been, sorry, Steve, I was just going to say that I've visited most of the schools, and it's been great to work with you and the children, and we're really excited to continue that. It's been so interesting so far. So yeah, we're just looking forward to continuing with the project for the rest of the school year and after the summer as well.
Nice.
We're hoping that each one of you finds the best way to kind of adapt the ideas in a way that suits you, that suits your routine, that suits your class, that suits your space. So there is no expectation to deliver on anything. So we are not here to kind of check whether the children have become super children or whether you become super teachers. There's absolutely no expectation of thought. But what we would like to see is some kind of ongoing engagement with that idea of going outside and see what's out there, because this has really seemed to have worked in terms of making children attentive and develop more of their inquisitive attitudes. So this is really what it is, and if without you, there's no point in doing it. So it's really important we keep the dialogue going, and you let us know if any support that's needed, but mostly what you are learning, what you are observing, what you are seeing, you know, as you're working very closely with the children. This is a really big exploration, I think, from all sides, and we're very grateful that you're on board.
That's a very succinct way to finish, Laura. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Okay, any last points or questions? Anything? Obviously, there's more chance after this just to carry on if something occurs to you in the middle of the night. Often happens to me. Just get in touch. Okay, are we good? I don't want to. If you guys are happy to, you happy? Yeah.
So Stephen, do you want to just flag where the outdoor workshops next year might be headed, or how we build on what we've done so far?
Oh, well, we were just talking. So Laura was mentioning a little bit more about that idea of grounds
Yeah.
change. So I'm not going to say improvement, Laura. You've just learned something from you. So that idea of basically using some of those sensorial inquiries to help support a change to the outside space. So that's definitely something that we do. I know I'm blowing my own trumpet, but it's something we do very well at LTL, and we have lots of ideas around. So taking and supporting children's voice and staff voice to help support and bring that to life will be a great thing. And if that means we need to, you know, help you guys with a bit of fundraising, or we need to point in the direction of freebies, that's obviously important too. It doesn't have to be expensive. We're not talking about you creating a massive big plan, more about just helping to make sure that children see some result of their inquiry and some of the things that they've discovered to help make a change to the space that they spend so much time in. Okay. We've come to the end. If you guys are happy, I'm going to stop recording. Otherwise, it'll still be recording when I stand up and go for a cup of tea.
It's a shame we can't share a cup of tea and coffee.
Apparently it does. Apparently it does.